welcome to the Stream of Art podcast, where we chat openly about creativity, personal growth, and building a career in the arts. I'm Michelle Manette.
And I'm Robyn Lester.
And this is episode 36, and today we are talking about change. But first, as always, we are going to kick it off with a check-in. Did you want to start us off there, Robyn?
Yeah. I don't have a win again. I feel like I haven't had a win in weeks. That's okay. That sounded depressing. I don't mean that in a depressing way. It's just that I haven't been actively engaged in much. But in terms of an interesting thing and something I'm grateful for, I'm combining the two again. I went to see the Siberian Orchestra.
Ooh, nice.
Was it last week or the week before? It doesn't matter. But so super grateful for just live performances. It was a lot of fun. And it's the first time I've been to, I guess I haven't been to a lot of large concerts. It's the first time I've been to a concert where there's like lasers and pyrotechnics.
Oh, man.
Watching it was just like, I felt like a kid who was seeing fireworks for the first time. Like I was super just like smile on my face. It was so like, it was an assault on the senses, but in like all the best ways, you know, like just like lights, and you could feel the heat from like the flames going off, and it was loud, and there was like such a diverse mix of instruments, and yeah, it was a lot of fun and a great way to kind of like kick off the holiday season, I guess.
Yeah, Mike and I went to see them, well over a decade ago. I'm not even going to try to guess a time, but like, and that it was such an incredible performance. I remember feeling like the same thing. It was just, it's so well done. And
so fun. Like, yeah, they do a really good job. What I really, really appreciated about it, and I walked away feeling like they're just very generous. Like there's something about they're performing, and you can tell that everything they're doing is for the audience. None of it is to fuel their own ego.
Yeah, that's very true.
It's all about the people in the crowd. And I think that's the first time I've been to a concert where I had that sort of feeling from the performers. And like even just like the way they would come off stage and they'd walk up the aisles and stuff playing their instruments, and they just seem like a really good group of humans.
Yeah. I wonder how much of that comes from the fact that they are the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, that it's about the sound of the whole. So no one person is more important than another. It's every voice adds to the collective. And so maybe that makes it easier to feel like, you know, you're part of something, and that it is this offering around this time of year, especially, you know, there is sort of maybe a natural increase in people's generosity.
Yeah, it could be that. And they did do a really nice job of like introducing everyone who was on the stage. And I also like they did a nice shout out to all the people who helped make the show what it is. Like, you know, because of course there's so many people who are involved in like the set. Like they gave a shout out to the guy who designed the light show, which is like, yeah, that's a huge part of this. Like the laser show is massive. I think you're right. Like they don't see this as we're a band and you're coming to see us. We're a team on a mission to entertain, and that's what we're doing. And we all have a really important part to play in that, and we're going to acknowledge that. I just thought it was really cool. I really liked that.
Awesome. Did you get one of their CDs, and are you playing it on a loop?
No, I didn't get one of their CDs. I am playing a couple of their Christmas songs on a loop on Spotify for sure. But I kind of regret, I wish I'd gotten some merch, but I didn't. Oh, well, that's fine. Yeah. Memories are just as good.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think I got a CD when I went and I listened to it a bunch. Which again, for somebody like me who, I mean, by that point I was still like, I think this was like pretty much my ambivalence towards Christmas had settled in. You know, I was still pretty excited to hear it, 'cause it's just great music too.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I do have a win.
Woo!
I finished writing lyrics for another song.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I think because I'm still doing the Songwriting Without Boundaries challenges. I am halfway through the book. I finished the second challenge this past week. It was all about metaphor. It was super fun. So again, for anybody who's interested in writing in general, even if you're not interested in writing songs and you want to get some good fun writing practice. Definitely. Songwriting Without Boundaries by Pat Pattison is really great. It was really fun. So I think that is helping just to kind of dislodge any lyrics from my brain. And I'm about halfway through writing lyrics for another song too, the one I was mentioning earlier. But yeah, so that was my win. So a fun and interesting thing. So, and I actually sent you one of these videos this past week. So Jamie Cullum, he's one of my all-time favorite artists. He's been hugely influential on me. And he has something that he calls Song Society. And it's where he will, I think it takes an hour he'll pick a song he loves or he's interested in. He'll learn it. Usually it'll be him and like his band. So it'll be like a bass player, a drummer, maybe somebody else. They'll learn the song and then they'll perform it. And the idea is that you perform it just live, with mistakes, doesn't matter. You do it, you play it from the heart. And he's amassed quite a collection of these really beautiful covers that he does. And Jamie Cullum is just like a master of cover songs.
Oh, nice.
He does them so well. But he hadn't uploaded one in a while. But over the last couple of weeks, he's actually posted 2. So he did, the one that I sent you was Sabrina Carpenter, Please, Please, Please. And I think it's also blended with espresso. And then he also released Sledgehammer by Peter Gabriel, which was excellent. So highly recommend checking those out. I will put links to both those videos in the show notes. And also even just the YouTube page has so many other ones too. So he has, I don't even know how many covers, but they're all excellent. And it's actually, so many of the artists that I'm into now, I got into because of hearing him do a cover. So really excellent stuff. And then the thing I appreciate, this is actually one I hadn't thought of. I was so excited about having another lyric win and about Jamie Cullum stuff. I hadn't thought about something I appreciate. But I think right now, I got a good one. Right now, I really appreciate living in an apartment and not needing to shovel.
That's hilarious. I was thinking about you this morning as I looked out on the driveway, and I'm like, I bet Michelle is really enjoying like the nice snowy view, knowing that she doesn't have to shovel a driveway.
Yes. I actually love the snow when I don't have to go and actively participate in shoveling it.
Yeah.
When I can just be inside and I can just witness the majesty of these big fluffy flakes as they gently glide to the floor. I really enjoy that. And I remember that from being in the apartment the last time, because the apartment that Mike and I lived in, well, you'll remember that had the really, really big windows. And so just on a nice snowy Saturday evening, I'd have like soup going. I'd be on the couch playing Skyrim with my dog, and the snow would be falling, and just the color, with the street lights and just these big fat snowflakes.
Yeah.
It felt so nice. And so I had a bit of that over the last week, as it's been snowing, and I've just been able to huddle up in here, just working on music and reading books and just not missing shoveling at all.
It's interesting because there's definitely a different kind of, like, I love, and I remember that from the apartment, it's so cozy. And I love snowfalls, but there is now, being in the house, this kind of like, there's a background of anxiety because it's like, how much is this going to build up? And am I going to be able to shovel this all?
Yeah.
And when am I going to do it? And like, when do I need to leave tomorrow?
How much time does it take?
How much is it going to, yeah. And when am I, it's like, I just want to be in my pajamas all day. So like, when should I do it in the morning and get it over with? Or should I do it later? Like, it's all this sort of like background noise that deprives you of fully enjoying the snowfall.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I actually don't mind shoveling. It's kind of nice to get fresh air and exercise. And
yeah.
But on days that are, I think it's okay today. Like, I think it's manageable, but there's definitely times where you go out and it's like the end of the driveway is up to your waist and you're like, oh man.
Yeah. Yeah. I always find it really rough. Because I'm really small.
Yeah.
So it takes me so much longer. Or if I'm overzealous and I try to put too much snow on my shovel, I end up with back problems. Like I already struggle with back issues, probably from sitting so much, and I think from working out too, but like shoveling just destroys my back. So yeah, I feel like that's like the one part of winter that if we could do away with that, if we could all just snap our fingers and just the snow just goes away on the streets and the driveways and sidewalks, I think we'd all enjoy winter way more because there's something really beautiful about this time of year. And, you know, when I was living at the house before, I would go and walk around in the winter. It was really nice. Like to go walk around the pond near the house, and it was quiet and fresh. And, you know, I think I could really enjoy the winter in the right setting, but only if there's no shoveling.
Well, some people have heated driveways to avoid shoveling, which I think...
How does that work?
I don't know. It's probably super expensive, and I don't know how effective it is in like our climate where we're getting quite a lot of snow. Like this might be something that's kind of in more mild areas. But also just like, I don't know, it's more electricity, right? Like it's... Yeah. I'd rather shovel.
Yeah. Yeah, and I suppose, you know, and obviously not everybody has the means to do this, but there are services you can hire people to come, you know, plow it away and all of that. I know it's a very privileged thing to be able to do, but there are solutions for that don't involve having heated driveway.
Yeah.
Anywho.
That's a little bit of a side tangent.
Yeah. But we live in Canada, so, you know, it's sort of par for the course. We're going to talk about snow and shoveling.
Or weather, just generally. I feel like that's like the top topic of conversation with Canadians.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful that there is snow, because I don't know if it was last year. There's been, in recent memory, there's been, you know, a couple years where it's been a green Christmas, which I know you're not super into Christmas, but I am still.
I can appreciate it on behalf of the people who still like Christmas.
Yes. And it's just like green Christmas. It still doesn't feel normal to me because all I've ever known are snowy Christmases. So
yeah. Yeah. And again, I can appreciate having the snow for the season now that I don't have to deal with it.
Yeah.
But before I would have been, you know, like, forget your white Christmas. I just don't have to do anything with it. Or when I had to like take the bus and you know, lugging a guitar with me, that was a lot. So yeah, you know, now that I'm very sheltered up in my ivory apartment tower, enjoy your snow, Christmas people. All right, main topic, change. So I know you had suggested this topic as talking about dealing with changing plans, but I brought in the topic, although if you want to talk about that, of course, that's fine. I was just thinking in terms of what I would be able to bring to the table, although that is part of it, learning how to navigate when plans change. Yeah. Because I've struggled with that historically. But I think, where I was thinking about taking this conversation is, talking about how you navigate change generally, and that can be plans, it can be bigger changes. But I'll let you kick it off because you'd been the one to suggest it. But that's sort of where I wanted to focus. And then maybe if there's time, talking about how we navigate like wanting to make change and all of that.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Wanting to make change. So I feel like change is one of those things that just kind of happens to me. It's not something that well, no, that's not true. I guess I've actively sought it out before, but yeah. And I think for me, like the reason I kind of thought of this topic was just like kind of reflecting on it's almost been a year now that we've been doing this podcast, and sort of thinking back to where I was last January and last February and versus where I am now. Mm-hmm. And it's just interesting, like this past year, there's been so many shifts and changes to what I'm doing with my art and what my goals are and what I find challenging about it. And I haven't, I stopped listening back to our podcast episodes because I actually like the idea. I find it too painful, the idea of listening to myself in the past, feeling like I figured it out, feeling like I have a sense of direction and stuff like that, because now I'm back to feeling like I don't have that. Mm-hmm. And I think there's just a lot of shame for me around, I had, I think it was around February last year where I really felt like things had clicked and I'd established kind of a routine for myself and things were feeling good. And then that kind of just went off the rails. Like that changed. Yeah. And it wasn't an intentional shift. Like it just shifted. But to me, it feels like change feels like failure a lot of times. And I guess there's different types of change too, right? Like this is maybe I don't know if you would call this change. I don't know. But I think it is change in mindset or whatever. Yeah. And I think it's a bit of a struggle. And so to me, change feels sort of threatening, and it's not something I really want to embrace. And it does feel like it's just things that happen to me versus things that I have a hand in driving, you know?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. I think that's really honest and profound. First of all, I think it's interesting. Were you listening back to like every episode for a while?
Yeah, I was.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I did. I wasn't, but I guess because I edit them. So maybe I'm like, oh, that was my listening time.
You were listening to them probably like more than once, really. Yeah. So for a little while I was listening back, and then I had to stop because it's embarrassing. Like it's embarrassing to think back to where I was this time last year, maybe not this time last year, but January, February last year, and versus where I am now. And and to have like a record of that shift as well is really, really hard for me.
Yeah.
And I'm someone who's always been like this, where I have ambition or ambitions, and then I'll kind of start moving forward with a project idea or whatever. And then eventually I burn out on it, or like I abandon it for whatever reason. And then I'm into that shame spiral of like, I can't follow through with anything. Like I don't know how to balance, because it does, like, it gets overwhelming. So it's like, I don't know how to balance moving things forward with taking care of myself without just throwing in the towel completely.
Oh, yeah.
Which is where I'm at, right? Like I haven't painted for months now. Like it's been, and I know we've talked about seasonality and how, and I think it is cyclical for me, but like this right now, I feel like the furthest away from art that I ever have been. Like it really, and the inclination to get back to it, like that kind of drive is just, I don't even see any kind of hint of it right now. And like, what do I do with that when like a lot of my identity has been wrapped around the fact that I paint and do artsy things and stuff like that, right? So like, yeah, and then, I shared this with you off the podcast, but like, changes to my employment too is something that's top of mind right now, because my job is kind of up in the air with like funding changes and stuff like that. So it's just figuring out like, what am I all about and what's my next move and like, what do I want my life to be and all that stuff. It's just like, I have no idea. And I could sit down and spend time trying to think it through, which I did do last winter. I did a lot of that work. And then I thought I came up with an answer. And now reflecting back on that answer, it doesn't really resonate with me anymore. And so it's like, it creates a very kind of lost feeling, because it's like I could go through that work and come up with an answer, but history has shown that the answer I come up with is never sticks. So like, I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, man.
It's aggravating. It's very aggravating to just feel like you're like legit feeling like you're spinning your wheels.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I resonate with so much of what you've said. First of all, yeah, I was taking some notes, and I'm sure I'm going to miss something, but that was a gold mine. And I'm sure anybody listening can relate to most, if not all of that sort of feeling. So yeah, the idea of change as failure is a really interesting thing you said. And I think that is at the crux of what makes some change so challenging for people, especially in terms of identity. And you brought identity up as well. And that's been something I've definitely struggled with, because I definitely built a very particular kind of identity where I latched, for me, I talked about latching my sense of self and the biggest part of my identity to being a musician and being disciplined and all the stuff that kind of goes around with that. And how as that conflicted with who I really was and, who I am, I don't think I worded it that way at the time, but that was I think that maybe the overwhelming feeling I had was of being a failure. Like I failed to be the thing I claimed to be. Like I failed to be myself, when actually what I was bumping up against was who I really was, or who I really am, bumping up against this label I had attached to myself that had become, that was right for a long time, but was just too narrow.
Yeah.
And I think in general, that's one of the issues with identity is when we go too narrow with it. And we're so much bigger than that. Humans are so big. We have so much in us that when you latch on to one particular identity, whether that's for me, a musician, whether that's for you, painter, artist, whatever it is, even in terms of employment, you have this identity as like whatever the job is you do, that becomes a part of who you are. When that comes under threat, or it's no longer true, it can feel like, oh, I failed at being myself. Yeah, and so that's just so interesting, because I hadn't heard it worded that way before. But yeah, change is being a sign of failure. And I guess it makes sense because we feel so threatened by it. Like it feels like this dangerous thing, like you don't want it. And you were saying, like, it feels like things just happen to you. Like it's not something you have agency over.
It's not intentional.
Change happens. Yeah.
And that's been my relationship with it anyways, right?
Yeah.
Like I haven't, and even, when I think of like my jobs, like the change in jobs, it's always been, the change has been a result of needing to get away for some reason, right?
Yes.
Again, it's because of it's being driven by things that are out of my control, versus I'm going to make an intentional change here. And that could be a mindset shift on my part. And it probably is. I think I skew pessimistic and defeatist. And so I think there's a lot of mindset stuff going on here too. And I think a lot of that is a self-protective kind of mechanism that kicks in. And like circling back to what you were saying about like the identity and stuff. And I think like for me, what I've realized is a lot of my identity and self-worth comes from what I do. Yes. So whether that's my job or my hobbies, but like, and I suspect that resonates with a lot of people. And, I've thought too, like it would be kind of nice to have a family. I don't want kids, but the thing that would be nice about that is that you would have, it's another way of drawing value and another kind of form of identity that isn't work related and isn't related to things you're doing or working on, because so much of my sense of self is wrapped up in those things, which is like kind of sad because you're missing a big piece of the pie, right? Like we have our identities as siblings, as children, as partners, as friends, and all of that to me is just, I don't even, it's completely disconnected. Like I don't even think of the value I bring in those areas. Yeah. Which is really problematic because like that's the thing that's going to stay the most consistent. In my case anyways, and this wouldn't apply to everyone, but in my case, like my relationships are the things that are most consistent over the things that I do.
Yeah. And I will say, as somebody who is, your family, but also I feel like we're friends too, like how much our relationship has meant to me, and how you are, you bring so much joy to my life and so much meaning to my life. And the fact that that's something that you're, it sounds like it's not intentionally, but it's not factoring into, your sense of self is really sad, because, when I think about you, I think about you as a person more than, even though we do this podcast together and we talk about art and creativity, like that's not the first thing I think about when I think about you. I think about, just how open-minded you are and understanding and thoughtful, and how you're one of the first people I talk to about stuff I'm going through because you're a good listener. Like that's huge. And that is something you're going to take with you regardless of what your hobbies are and what your job is. So it sounds like there's, I think you'd benefit from integrating more of yourself and thinking about more of those parts of you that are, that you take with you everywhere.
It's a really interesting point. And what's really interesting too is that like my sense of self is very narrow on the things that I am working on or doing. But when I look at other people, it's not like I look at other people through that lens. It's a lens that I only apply to myself, which is really, it's really quite interesting. I don't know why that's happened, but I definitely do feel like there is a very strong disconnect.
Yeah.
Which leads to a very skewed perception of myself and who I am. I mean, ultimately puts me in a vulnerable position because here I am now, right? Feeling like a complete piece of garbage because I've changed my mind on things. Like, ultimately, that's what this is.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with trying things and realizing, and thinking. I think this is the big thing. Try things and you think that you figured it out and realize that, no, actually, that wasn't quite right. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But even as I say that, I feel like there is something wrong with that, like
you feel the tightness in your chest as you're like, no, your body's rejecting it, even though you know on a logical level that is the truth, that it's okay to make a choice or a plan and to have like you said to feel like you have it figured out, and then you realize later, oh, I don't have it figured out. Or I would extend that too to think about it being okay that something maybe a solution you have or a plan you have works for a time, but that it no longer serves you. It doesn't mean it didn't work or it failed. It was good for you for that period of your life, and then you changed. And so then this is the idea behind having that constant conversation with yourself, like having that self-awareness, developing that relationship with yourself, because then you can make adjustments to what you're doing to better reflect who you are in that moment, who you're becoming, because that is just the natural trajectory, is that we change, our lives change, and the needs we have in the moment are just going to be different. And it doesn't mean that the other ones were a lie. They've just changed. And maybe things come back around, and maybe they don't, and that's okay. It's kind of like the idea with friends and relationships, right? Where you have some friends you have while you're, you work together and you're in college together, but it doesn't go beyond that, and that's okay. Like, you don't have to cling to every single friendship or every single relationship. Some of them, they're just there for a season. They're there to serve a purpose at the time, and you don't necessarily wish them ill. You hope for the best for them, and maybe if you see them down the line, you get together or whatever. But there's just not going to be the same need to have people continue on down a road together. Whereas for some things they will remain consistent. So it's just like about being willing to let go. And I think perhaps maybe not looking back so much, or getting to a point where over time and with some work, you can look back and just feel appreciation for what that version of you was trying to do. And and I think too, like what you were saying about that need to like protect yourself, I think that's it exactly. I think a big part of my healing journey has been to, in some cases to forgive myself for choices I made at the time when I thought I had things figured out and I didn't, because I was just doing the best I could. And in a lot of cases, I was just trying to survive the best I could. And when you're feeling that kind of pressure, that kind of internal pressure where just everything feels heavy and you feel like you got to figure it out, but you can't, you don't know where to start, and you just feel so overwhelmed, like you do go into like a fight or flight. Your body is just trying to get through, and whether that's through distractions or through trying different plans or coming up with things, like whatever your thing is at the time, it's always just you doing the best you can in that moment. And with work and self-awareness and self-compassion and all of that, you can learn to recognize those patterns and then make different choices down the road. But it takes time, and so much of it comes back to just giving yourself grace and giving yourself compassion.
Well, and even making different choices can be really, it's that in and of itself is draining, right? Because it's like the different choice is going to be running against what your natural inclination would be. And I think when we run counter to our natural inclination or our typical way of doing things, that's draining.
It is.
It's draining to do different things. One thing I've been reflecting a bit on too is I think I do. I look back on things and then I spin a narrative. And the narrative is the same. The narrative is I never finish what I start.
Mm-hmm.
I'm incapable of completing projects. I don't follow through, don't work hard enough. It's all along those lines. Never going to be able to figure out what to do with my life. No one's ever going to see me. Like all these sorts of things, right? And the other big one right now is like just the work environment. It just isn't built for people who are wired like I am. Like
absolutely.
I don't belong. And I think that narrative in and of itself serves a purpose. I think it's a self-sabotage. I don't like the word self-sabotage because self-sabotage.
I thought that the other day too.
I think ultimately self-sabotage isn't about trying to harm yourself. It's about trying to protect yourself,
Yes.
It's just best intentions, but kind of like not doing it quite right.
Yeah.
And so I think that whole tendency that I have to kind of to reflect on my past and build that narrative is a way to keep myself small, keep myself feeling small, to keep myself from moving forward with things, or for trying things. And I think that it's a way of protecting myself, because when you're small and you keep yourself in a corner and you stay quiet on things and you don't get too out there, then there's no risk of rejection. There's no risk of being wrong. And I think that's a big one for me, which, and I started this conversation saying how like I don't like listening back to past episodes because I said things that no longer apply anymore. In other words, I was wrong. Like that's how it feels, right? Or someone could call me out and be like, you lied or whatever. Like, so it's that being wrong and being called out are big fears of mine. And so that kind of self-preservation kicks in and it manifests as being mean to myself, because that's the thing that's going to keep myself hidden.
Yeah, I just resonate so much with what you just said. Yeah, I like the idea of calling it self-preservation rather than self-sabotage. Because I think at the heart of it, that's what we're trying to do, is keep ourselves safe.
It's just misguided.
Exactly.
Was the word I was looking for before.
Yeah, that's
misguided.
Perfect. Yeah. It's the idea that, when you know better, you do better. In those moments, you're grabbing for what you need to, especially when it's very, very emotionally driven, which if you're worried about being called out for being wrong or being a liar, that links right down to your, more ancient brain, where it's you don't want to be rejected by society. And so of course that feels like a danger, like an immediate threat. Like I cannot be discarded by my society because I'm going to starve and die. Like I need them to think that I am, I'm right, to be accepted and all of that. And so it's very emotionally charged. And in those moments, you really are going to struggle to make any kind of a change, because you're just going to reach for the thing that's going to bring you that relief.
Yeah.
And often that is, making yourself smaller, spinning narratives and all of that.
When all of this stuff is happening on such a background level too, like you're not aware. It's not like you're thinking all of this stuff. It's not until like you take some time to think about your thoughts, which I'm very good at doing, to my detriment, I think, in some cases. But that's when you can start kind of seeing these patterns and stuff. But it's not obvious in the moment, right? So it's like, it's a challenge to navigate when it's not, when this stuff is just running in the background.
Yeah. And I think something for me too that I've really picked up on over the last year is just how important, how deeply tied your thoughts are to your emotions. So often we think about, I'm going to think happy thoughts and then I'll feel better. But it's actually the reverse. It's actually, if you can find a way to improve how you feel, that can make a big difference in being able to shift your thoughts. So a lot of us just have it backwards. And this is where a lot of that, like somatic healing comes in, the vagus nerve, breath work, all of that stuff can help you to feel better. And then that in itself will give you access to a level of clarity and self-awareness that you just don't have. So when you're spiraling in your thoughts and you just try to throw more thoughts at it, it's just adding more to the hurricane rather than just like sinking into your body and doing that work first.
I think you have to, what I've kind of learned, and yesterday was a really good example. So like before, like I had to work yesterday. I was running an event for our groups. And before going, I had a complete meltdown because like my clothes weren't fitting right. And like, I felt like a big pile of garbage and just, you know, like, and I was losing control. Like I was screaming in the car. I was, you know, I just like completely out of control. I'm also learning that I'm not good at emotional regulation. It's something that's one thing that I was always really impressed with when I was at the preschool, because that's something we teach kids, like how to identify when they need to go to the calm down tent.
Yeah.
And that is something that I have not learned for myself, and it was never really taught. I wasn't taught that, right?
Yeah.
So I was out of control. And the thing that got me out of it was getting to the event and then having conversations with people. And, you know, so it wasn't thinking. I didn't think my way out of it. I had to not act my way out of it, but I had to be put in an environment where I didn't actually have time to think.
Yeah, where you were supposed to be present.
Yeah, because I was having conversations with people and I was getting things set up. And I think that's one thing I have figured out is the best way to kind of get myself out of a negative headspace is to actually go and do something that disrupts that solitude so that I'm not able to think more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, because we get ourselves into these long drawn out sessions of just, and I guess like a spiral, where just it goes around and around, and then it's pulling you into the past and pushing you into the future, and you think, okay, if I just do more of that, it's gonna get better. I'm gonna figure it out, rather than the thing that's gonna work is like, I actually got to get out of here. I got to get out of my head in whatever way that looks like, and a lot of the times that does involve literally getting out of the house and going and interacting with people and realizing, oh, there's a world out there. Or that could just be as simple as like meditation, or, you know, moving your body, exercise, like doing something other than letting yourself just sit and stew in this swirl of past and future thoughts, and just do something that forces you to be present.
Yeah. It's a really, really, really hard thing to do.
It is, absolutely.
Like, you know, like, because we want to sit and wallow. I mean, at least I do. I don't know why it feels good to feel bad sometimes. Like, it just, like, I think for me, I don't know what it is. It's just like determination. It's like, well, I have this fear. I can't remember if I was talking to you about this or with my therapist, but I have this fear that if I get myself into a good space, people are going to forget that I'm in a rough spot and need help or something like that. Like there's something there.
Interesting.
Yeah. Where it's like, I almost want to stay stuck and
I know exactly what you mean.
Because I don't want people to think, oh, Robyn's all good now. And then just leave me, you know, like this like fear of abandonment in my time of need kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I really, really, and I think there's stuff there that stems from childhood.
Yeah.
But so for me in particular, it feels like the act of getting myself out of this headspace, almost it's scary because it almost feels like I'm inviting abandonment. Like it's very hard. Yeah, it's really interesting. I have a lot of really weird quirks.
I don't think that sounds weird at all. That makes total sense to me.
Well, that's validating to hear because it's very strange.
I've felt that too. Yeah, because I've had that where, you know, if I'm going through a difficult time and there's somebody I've been talking to about it, the next time I have a conversation with them, especially if they're offering me some kind of support, I don't, even if I'm feeling better that day, it's like it drags me back down because I'm like, oh no, if I'm doing better, what's going to happen to the support I was getting? I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah,
I've had that too.
It's that, right? And because I've had people, like numerous people in my life be like, Robyn, like you're getting yourself into this state and you won't get yourself out of it. Like it's so hard to listen to because you're just not getting yourself out of it. And the reason I'm not getting myself out of it is because of that fear of if I do and I seem fine. And when someone says that, it makes me cling to that idea that I'll be abandoned even more, because what I'm hearing when someone says you need to get yourself out of it is, because this is hard to listen to, what I'm hearing is once you're out of it, we're not going to be listening anymore or something, right? Like there's like this, like it just like, it triggers that fear of abandonment even more. And then you start to feel like a burden as well. And like this, like, I mean, mental health stuff is really, really hard to navigate, you know, like it's just.
Yeah, it is. I think you and I actually line up in a lot of ways. For as different as we are on some levels, I think a lot of what we've struggled with are actually parallel.
Yeah.
Because a lot of what you're saying is stuff I've felt and I've been dealing with as well.
Yeah.
And that was definitely one. You articulated it really well. Well, for whatever it's worth, I'm not going to leave you if things get better, if you feel better. If you want to talk or if you need help, and this is a note I made, you know, learning how to communicate your needs is so challenging. It's so challenging. I always went the passive aggressive route because I was so afraid to ask for what I wanted. Like I felt like why would anybody give me what I want? I don't deserve it. I have to be in this bad spot where I'm so down. That's the only way I'm ever going to receive help. I can't be good and then ask for what I need.
100%.
Yeah.
And I had this experience recently where I reached out to someone who I used to work with, and she's very involved in the nonprofit community and like has a lot of demands on her time. And I reached out asking if she would be open to connecting because I wanted to chat with her more about like, she's very open with her mental health journey. And I'm kind of feeling an itch to be a bit more open about mine. And I wanted to connect with her about navigating that. And I've been thinking about reaching out to her for probably like, I would say a year. And I finally did it. But in the back of my mind was why would she waste her time with me?
Yeah.
What makes me deserving of her time? And do I have enough to offer? And, you know, it's sort of similar kind of things, right? And I've had that experience too, where like the only way that you can ask for help is when you're in a really, really rough spot. Like that's the only, and so then you kind of almost like you almost play mind games with yourself to get you there.
Yeah.
And I wish there was a way. I mean, there is a way of asking for help. And this is the thing. I find it a little bit aggravating because you'll see this a lot. Like for whatever reason, I've seen a lot of posts on Instagram and LinkedIn about mental health stuff and like just like ask for help. But first of all, it's hard to know what kind of help you need. It's extremely challenging like to ask for help in the first place. Like that's a barrier for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, like low self-worth being one of them. And I always feel bad. It's like, I can ask for help, but I need to know, I want to give people direction because it's not like, because it feels like a burden to be like, help me. It's like, okay, well, how? I'm like, well, I don't know. I just know that I need help. You know, like it's just a really challenging thing to do. So like, but I recognize that like I need to get better at, instead of letting myself get to a state where I'm so in such a bad spot that people know they need to help me. I need to be better at communicating it earlier.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to do that.
Yeah. I don't think any of us knows how. I think that's one of the reasons why something I've been seeing floating around over the last maybe year or two is a piece of advice people will give to somebody who's trying to help somebody who maybe has lost like a family member or a friend who's grieving or somebody who has a new baby or whatever. They advise you to avoid reaching out and saying, let me know if I can help. Because it's like, you just don't know. In the flurry of all of that, you just don't know. And so they said, well, here are the things that generally you need when these kinds of things are happening. Just go and help. Yeah. Rather than asking them to really have to figure it out. Because when you're in it, you have no clue. It's a burden. It's a burden to figure out how. I mean, like, and with mental health, like when you're grieving, I mean, that's a whole. You can't even figure out how to navigate the grieving process, right? Like the last thing you can figure out is like how to help someone help you. And I think the same thing applies when you're struggling with mental health stuff. It's like, I don't even know how to function properly right now. I can't guide you in how to help me. Yeah. Like, I wish I could. I wish I had the answers, but I don't even have the answers for myself to get myself out of this. Yeah. And yes, I've heard that advice before when it comes to grief. It's like you show up with food. Yeah. And it's uncomfortable. I think that we're not, and I've been in situations and I know that advice and it makes sense, but I've been in situations where I feel uncomfortable inserting myself in that way. Yeah. And I think that's what kind of stops people from doing that, because it feels a little bit awkward to be like, here's food. Yeah. Okay, bye. Yeah, I totally get that as well. And I feel like that would be my thought, is like, oh, they don't really want me doing that. But I think if I'm sort of putting myself in their shoes, or remembering like the times
I would love it.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be
bring me food any day of the week.
Even if it's somebody, I barely know, the fact that they thought of me would be really touching, and then it would be very helpful. So I think when you can think about it that way, it maybe makes it a bit easier. And I mean, honestly, it's if the worst thing is that they think it's weird that you brought them food, it's still on you did something, that probably helped them, and probably in the end they would be appreciative, or
I think it's one of those things you just have to do it once, and then you kind of get over the weirdness, and then you're like, okay, this feels more normal now, right? It's just out of the norm for a lot of people, and I think because of the way we are culturally, we're a little bit more disconnected than other cultures are.
Absolutely.
I had a coworker from Ukraine, and she came to Canada for a few years ago or whatever, and she said that was one of the biggest adjustments. She's like, no one really there's not really community here. Like people don't really invite each other into each other's homes, or and it doesn't do us a service, that's for sure. The other thing, I know we're not talking about, okay, this is off topic, but another suggestion, in case there's anyone who has someone in their life who's grieving, and you're not comfortable making food and giving food, just send them $100 to Uber Eats or whatever, right? Enough for them to order a couple meals for themselves or something. I think support with meals in whatever capacity is always really appreciated.
Yeah, because it's difficult to remember to feed yourself when you're struggling that way.
I think the other thing too, and this is something my mom had told me and it stuck with me, is I think immediately after someone dies, there's a flurry of activity, and you have people coming for the funeral and stuff, but then it's 3 months later and it feels like the world's moved on, but you haven't. And that's a nice time to reach out and just to say to the person, I'm thinking of you or whatever. Because I think it's an isolating experience to be grieving the loss of someone who's really close to you, and then the rest of the world is kind of just keeps going, it's a strange, not that I've really experienced it firsthand, but I've experienced it secondhand, and it's strange.
Yeah, it's a really good point, good suggestion, and makes me think it would be a good practice for all of us to periodically check in with people, just in general, to maybe start. Maybe it's not really a norm in our culture, but all it takes is somebody deciding to make that change, to go, hey, I just want to check in, and and if somebody's going through something, then you act and you go, okay, I'm gonna get them something, put something together, even if it's not just you. The burden doesn't have to be all on you, or the responsibility, not the burden, the responsibility doesn't have to come all from you, but finding other people who know that person, let's get together and do this thing for them, put together a care package, or some things you can bring that sense of community and make it more of a regular practice, rather than having this sense where we're all isolated and we're all separated and we're having to struggle alone.
Yeah. I think there's also a fear with people. And I think I'll use grief as an example again. I think there's a fear of people reaching out and checking in on people because they don't want to remind the person who's lost someone of that loss. There's this fear of it'll upset them if we bring it up. And it's no, that person is upset.
Yeah.
Whether or not, they're thinking of this person that they've lost, whether or not you bring it up. Yeah. And I think I have a friend who lost someone close to her, and she went to this party. I don't know, it was a few months after, I guess. And no one mentioned his name. No one brought him up. And she felt like a leper, was the way she had described it, because it was on her mind. Yeah. But it was he didn't exist anymore, because everyone was too scared to cause her pain, but that actually caused her more pain.
Yeah. The grieving process takes the time it takes, and it often takes a long time and happens in many layers. So there's almost a sense of, I imagine, that people are just wanting you to get over it. They're like, oh, you shouldn't be thinking about this thing anymore. And so it makes the person feel worse because they're like, oh, I'm still thinking about this person I've lost or this thing that happened or whatever. And I guess I shouldn't be because nobody's talking about it.
Yeah.
And so it sort of adds to the already devastating emotions with a lot of shame and a lot of feeling broken or feeling like, oh, I should have figured this out. Should have figured out grief rather than letting it unfold the way it needs to and allowing that and giving it safe space to exist.
And you can say the same with mental health too.
Absolutely.
Where there's like sort of, and I don't think it's not anything malicious. Like people kind of assign this timeline to your own healing. And I think it's because people genuinely want you to be better and to feel better. But it's very challenging when you feel like you're having to live to these timelines that other people are putting on you, especially if it's like you have a condition where it's like, this isn't going to get better.
Yeah. I recently realized that I've been guilty in the past of, when somebody close to me is struggling or going through a hard time, my instinct is to try to give them things to fix it.
Yeah.
And which is a problem on a lot of levels, because for one thing, a lot of the time people who are, certainly for me, when I'm talking to somebody about something I'm going through, I just want to be heard. I just want to be heard, just to know that I'm not having to carry what I'm dealing with or what I'm feeling on my own. And so I feel like I was shutting unintentionally. I mean, again, my intentions were pure. I wanted to help somebody feel better, help them solve a thing. But, it was short-sighted. It was kind of arrogant as well to think, oh, this is going to work for you, because different things work for different people as well. And it takes a lot to go through the work of trying to find the thing that will help. And I'm trying to myself be a better listener, and I want to be somebody who is just like a safe place to come to while people figure stuff out in their own time, in their own way, without me interjecting my thoughts or my ideas. And I mean, obviously I'm here, if anybody wanted to ask about something I do or ask about something I've done that has helped me, then I'm happy to share. But I'm trying to discard giving unsolicited advice and just listen, just really hear somebody, really be with them, really be present with them. Because I think that's one of the best things you can give.
I feel like you do that fairly well.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
I feel like I can do better. You'll hopefully notice an uptick.
Oh, but all of us can. I mean, I default to that too sometimes, where I go into fix it mode. And I also, like when I'm in a rough spot, I don't necessarily, like there's two different spots I'm in. I'm in a rough spot where I just want to be heard, or I'm in a rough spot where it's like I need to talk this through and I need other perspectives. And and I want those other ideas. But I'm guilty of it as well, like of going into fix it mode. And again, it's coming from a place of like, I just want this person to feel better.
Yeah.
But actually sitting with them in their kind of sad emotions, that actually is the thing that lifts them up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that I think comes down to like, there's work on both sides, I think. Because I've been in this situation before where the person actually said, I just need you to sit with me in this.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay, I can do that. No problem. I just don't realize.
Yeah.
But then, so I think if we can feel comfortable communicating that to the other person, but there needs to be understanding on both sides of what that means, right?
Of course. Yeah. Of course.
Yeah. Or in my case, there's also been, I've kind of identified the people in my life who are good at sitting with me in it, and then those who are good. So like I go to different people depending on what I need too.
Yeah.
But 100%, like it's, I mean, don't feel bad if you slip into that kind of fix it mode, because I think that's just, we come by that naturally.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things what made me realize this, because I was journaling about something somebody else was doing, where I would say something and then they'd say something and it was like really bothering me. And I'm trying to now do a lot of work where I'm looking at like the things that other people do or say that really bother me tend to be a mirror. it's like, oh, it's a mirror for me to look at. Am I doing that? Because I'm not interested in, again, I'm not interested in trying to change other people because that's out of my control, but I do have control over myself. So I'm trying to use that to reflect back onto me and go, well, am I doing that? I'm like, oh, I do that actually. And it's really annoying from my perspective when I just want to be heard and somebody's like, well, I do this and I blah, blah. And it's like, we're not talking about you right now. We're talking about me. But I'm like, oh, and I do that. And again, it's my intentions aren't, malicious. It's a way of trying to connect with somebody, or it's a way of trying to help or whatever. And just not realizing that, and that comes again down to communication. Like, because we struggle to communicate in what ways we need help, other people don't know. And so they're just trying to trying to guess. They're just trying to throw spaghetti at the wall and hope that something sticks. But we don't know that that's not what we want. So we can't articulate. We just feel bad. We're like, oh, you're not helping. But yeah, I think having that awareness to go, I want to be listened to versus I would actually like some advice is I think really great to be able to have that. And definitely like having different people, it's the idea that I'm hearing a lot now in terms of relationships from relationship coaches, where they talk about making sure you don't put everything onto your partner or spouse. Like, you cannot expect one person to be all things for you. It's healthier to have some kind of a broader community so you have other perspectives, you have other people you go to for certain things. You're not just dumping everything onto this one person. And I think that is, community and communication and all of that, I think would go a long way. It's a lot of work to build that, but I think it gives you so much more stability, because change is something that happens, whether it's like a big, disorder event like losing somebody, or, a big global, like, a pandemic or whatever, or even just as you're changing, like having a community around you that can see you and accept you for all the parts that you are. I think that in itself would give people much more of a sense of stability, rather than trying to have this attachment to things like staying the same. Like, this is the way to feel secure, is like everything has to stay the same and nothing can change, and any kind of change feels like danger. Yeah, definitely. So bringing it back to just, learning how to deal with change, because it is a just natural part of life. It will happen whether we want it to or not. It's the Stoic idea of amor fati, just to learn to love fate. It's the idea behind rugged flexibility, which is an idea that comes from Brad Stulberg in his book, Master of Change, which I highly recommend anybody read. It's actually kind of a short read. It's only a couple hundred pages. It was a really good book, just talking about the ways in which you can build some more security that's more internal. So he talks about having a rugged and flexible identity and rugged and flexible mindset, learning how to, not react to things, but how to respond and all this stuff. So I won't go into details. I just recommend checking out the book. But that's an idea I talk about a lot, the idea of rugged flexibility. So you have, the idea too, he was a big one who inspired me to think about my values. So rather than trying to, just to bring it back briefly to identity, the idea of rather than attaching your identity to the things you do, like a narrow selection of things you do, attaching it to values which can be applied more flexibly. So I have like my values are integrity, discipline, clarity, curiosity, and then sympatheia, which is a Stoic term. And that I can apply across the board. So as and it's actually been really helpful to give me the freedom, or I'm giving myself the permission to change, because I am changing, and it's great, because I'm becoming more full, more of myself, because I have room. I'm giving myself room to spread out. I'm not making myself smaller and cutting away the things I don't like. I'm letting it all exist and all flow. And I'm bringing it back to these core values, these things that I really care about. There's so many different, which, I mean, integrity is the first one for a reason. It's because I want all parts of me to be in harmony, to be whole. It's all parts of the whole are intact in integrity. And there's so many different ways for me to be disciplined. That's changed, and it'll probably change. My expectation now is that I'm going to keep changing. And so that's been really helpful for me, I think, having that perspective rather than, oh, I'm the person who does this, who gets up at this time, who does this kind of intensive exercise or does this kind of intensive practice. I am somebody who cares about integrity and discipline and clarity and all of that. And I do it in these ways. And a lot of that, you know, like music is going to be a through line, I suspect, until the day I die. But the way how that looks is changing a lot. And I'm much more willing to let go of things that no longer work because I'm still me. It's just not so set in stone.
That's a really helpful way of thinking about identity, and that's not something I'd thought of before. But yeah, like you need it to be broader, right? It can't be specific to like, this is the thing I'm doing right now. Like that's too specific. But when I think about my values and then I look at what I've done in my life so far, it's like, yeah, I can see how it was all sort of aligned with my values, even though the things I've done have been varied.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. So you're not defined by any one thing you're doing. You're defined by what you care about and then how you experience that. And I think that'll only grow more, you know, as you're at this, you're at a place I think I was not too long ago. Like, again, I see a lot of myself in you now. And, you know, my journey has been so interesting in that I feel like I am more of myself as I'm changing and I'm doing more things because, again, they line up. So, you know, this idea that I had of like, I'm just about music, that's the only thing that really matters to me was not true. It's huge. I mean, it's still my calling. It's still one of the biggest parts of my life. But ultimately, like, what does that fall under? And a lot of that can be, you know, in terms of what I do for sharing with the world. But I can do that in a lot of ways. I'm really drawn to writing these days, to teaching. Like, there's so many different ways to do that. To like just be a creative person. There are so many different ways to do that. Like, when I think about you, and I think you are a creative person, not because you paint, but just because of the things you do. Like, you're somebody who seems to seek doing things that are creative. And again, it's the mismatch of like how other people see us versus how we see ourselves and all of that. But yeah, so I'd be interested to know at some point if this is an idea you play with and you think more in terms of values, how much that changes how you feel about yourself, and if that eases some of that tension and feeling like if you're not doing something, you're no longer you.
Right.
And I've been reading a lot of work from Diego Perez. He actually writes under the pen name Young Pueblo. He writes beautiful poetry and prose, and I'm absolutely obsessed with his work. And he's really big on the idea of embracing impermanence, recognizing that change is just natural, and letting that be a part of your healing journey really is learning to embrace that. And he talks a lot about attachments and expectations as well, which we've talked about expectations recently, but that was a really interesting thing for me. And I'm thinking about this a lot in my own life these days, these attachments, the things I attach, you know, whether we're attaching our identity to something, or our happiness to something, or our security to something. You know, it's when we feel attached to something, it brings a lot of suffering because those things inevitably change. So if we attach, you know, our hopes and dreams to like one person or to one goal, when that thing changes or it doesn't line up with our expectations, it makes us feel bad rather than learning how to navigate the fact that things are going to change and being willing to just move with it. And he talks a lot in the book of his I'm reading right now, Clarity and Connection. He talks a lot about relationships and how it's really important to have that communication and be able to, you know, be open with each other about where you're at and to be able to support each other in whatever way that needs to happen at that time and all of that. So I won't go too much into his ideas. I just recommend checking out his books as well, and his Instagram and his Substack. But I've been finding his words really moving, really inspiring, and very much aligned with where I am in my journey right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I do want to touch a little bit on the idea then of how to approach change when it's something you want, which, for me aligns very much. That's been a big issue for me, is at the same time I was afraid of things changing because I wanted to cling to that. I wanted to cling to that stability, that I wanted to control things or feel like I was in control. I also really wanted things to change because I wasn't happy. There's still things I want to change. I'm not as discontent now, but that was definitely an overwhelming feeling. Like I was in this middle point where I was trapped because I didn't want things to change because that was scary, but I wanted things to change because I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
So I've had to learn how to navigate deliberate change properly so that I can actually guide myself in the right direction. So, and again, some of these ideas are going to be coming from Diego Perez. So one of the things that I found really helpful is acceptance. So being able to accept where I am right now puts me on the right starting point to start making some changes. So whether I'm going for like a really big change or I just want to make little adjustments, which generally a big change happens when you make tiny adjustments. I'm not looking at where I am now and going, well, this is wrong. This is not good. I'm bad or whatever. I'm looking at this as just being where I am now. And it is what it is. And I'm finding the positive in it. And there are some things I want to change, but I'm not feeling the same kind of anxiety I did before. This is fairly recent, actually. I've been doing a lot with meditation and mindfulness and being more present. And that's been really helpful. So I'm not feeling like, oh, I will be happy when this thing changes. Because again, expectations, attachments, things might change in a totally different direction than I'm expecting. As long as I'm still lining up with my values and I'm being present in the moment and really living now, then I'll be able to go with the flow. I'm not going to attach to certain specific outcomes. Understanding too that change is an organic thing. Like you can't force it. It's going to happen naturally, as we were saying. You are going to just naturally change. And when you're making deliberate changes, you can't try to dictate the timeline. It's sort of like planting a seed. It's going to take the time it takes to grow. You can throw whatever you want at it, but it takes as long as it takes. And some plants take longer. And yeah, just recognizing that it is this organic thing that just you want to tend to, but you don't want to force. So it's like a gentle guidance in the direction, making changes each day that are in alignment with where you are and, what you're wanting to create, but again, gentle. So it's not, it just takes time to make better habits and make better choices. And like you said, it's exhausting. So you have to make sure that these sort of deliberate changes are interspersed with really good rest. Because especially if you're doing really deep emotional work, that is exhausting. So you have to give yourself those periods. And there was a really beautiful quote. Actually, let me see if I can find it because I'm pretty sure I read it this morning from Clarity and Connection. Yes, here we go. So it goes, slow moments are common after a period of serious growth. They should not be feared, but embraced as opportunities to get to know the new you. As you mature, you release so many layers that you sometimes change radically, and your mind and body feel like a new home. Slow moments are for renewal and integration of recent lessons learned. But a slow pace often finds a way to test how you have grown. This is an important time to observe your progress and notice where you need further work. So again, rest, reflection, all of that is really important, a really important part of the process. So recognizing that is natural, that is a natural part of making changes and going with it. If you need a rest day or week or month or a year in some cases, you do that. You do what you need to do to the best of your ability. I know that's hard too, because we have lots of hard wiring in our brains telling us to do stuff all the time. But if you can get to that point, it's really helpful. And yeah, like I said, my last note here is just change tends to happen in small increments. So if you want to change, if you want to go from being somebody who, doesn't write at all to somebody who writes a book, that is very small changes. It's like the quote from Zeno, well-being is realized in small steps, but it is no small thing. Yeah. It's that idea. It's just, taking little chunks. You don't have to do these big dramatic changes. They feel fun in the moment. They feel like, oh, it's fun to imagine I'm moving to a mountain and just living in a cabin on a mountain. But generally the more sustainable changes you make and choices you make are going to be the smaller ones that you do, just like they compound over time.
Well, even a change like that, if it's like, I'm going to move to the mountain, like there's little things that happen between, the point of now to getting to that point. So it's like change doesn't happen in an instant, right? Although actually in some cases I think it depends on what kind of change you're talking about.
Yes, yes.
Because there are situations like, you lose your job. That's a change in an instant. Or you lose a loved one. And I think, or your marriage ends or whatever.
Yeah,
those are the things that, marriage ending isn't, I guess you can argue that doesn't happen in an instant. But I think those are the ones that are also the most stressful for people, because it is this, it's whiplash, right? This jarring, like your life just flips upside down in a moment. But I think those sorts of changes that we initiate, I think those are the ones that it's not. We hear that's the fairy tale. We hear that fairy tale all the time where it's like, like the idea of like the overnight success, overnight success in Hollywood or whatever, right? It's like we hear that tale be spun. Is that a phrase? Yeah. But it's not accurate. It's not like they went to bed a carpenter and woke up a famous actor. Like it doesn't happen that way. There's steps in between. So I think that stuff that we initiate is slower paced than what we want it to be sometimes.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good reminder to avoid comparing yourself to other people. Finding inspiration from other people is fine. But I think especially if you are on a really deep internal journey, the more time you can spend with yourself, listening to your own intuition, which again, that's its own thing you also have to practice and get better at. You'll get better at over time. As long as you're listening to yourself, you put yourself on your own timeline. This is something also that he talks about in the Inward trilogy, the idea of accepting whatever rate of your growth is, your personal growth, your personal journey, not, it's the pressure of doing things on this timeline that doesn't really exist for people. Like you were saying with the overnight success, like that's just not reality. But we feel like we're falling behind, or we need to do more, and we need to just do more all the time rather than just finding our own pace and letting that guide us to where we're going. And that's going to look different than for other people, but that's good. We're not all supposed to be the same and have the same journey. That's not very interesting. We have our own. And, if you can disconnect from seeing what other people are doing, that's a good thing, or reduce it, have healthy boundaries around it so that you're not feeling lesser than, or like you're in the wrong spot. I do genuinely believe we are where we need to be at any time, and we are who we need to be at any time. And it's not better or worse than anybody we were or will be, or anywhere we were or will be. It's really neutral. Change is neutral. And that's very extreme, but obviously some changes, are unanimously feel bad. But those kinds of things, like we put value on, or label certain things that really.
I like the idea of change as it relates to personal growth as being neutral.
Yes, that kind of change, absolutely.
Yeah, because when it's not, you get into all sorts of tricky issues.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think that there's some. I think we like the idea of the kind of overnight change, over like the life overhaul, because there's a sense of power and control that comes from that idea, right?
Yeah.
That I think is comforting to us, but try to execute it, and how long does it last? I feel like the better place to be, and hopefully y'all get there someday, is just kind of like, I'm okay where I am right now, and just allowing the growth to happen at the pace it does, like what you were saying, right? But like that first step is being okay with who you are and how you are in the moment. And I think that's where we really struggle.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely really struggled with that for a long time. Yeah, a lot of these revelations for me are quite recent. I just sort of hit a point in my journey where I really kind of push forward on a lot of things. But that, again, that came on the tail end of a lot of very slow, very incremental adjustments and changes, and spending a lot of time. I spent a lot of time resting this year and just being with my feelings and being where I was and feeling bad about it, and then learning to let that go. It's just a whole thing. But it's also, it's life tends to be cyclical. So you'll go through periods where things feel like they're going well and they're getting better and you're feeling better, and then more stuff comes up, and it's just all part of it. It's I'm no longer expecting I'm going to hit a point where all of a sudden everything is smiles and sunshine. Like, it's gonna flow.
We've talked about this before too, right? There's no arrival point in life, but it's funny how, like, even though we've talked about it and we're still, like, for me anyways, I'm still kind of searching for that point.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think for me, it's like, I would just like to be at a point where I'm not struggling with the same stuff, It's tiring having struggled with the same things over and over and over again. And it feels like I'm hitting my head against a wall. Yeah. And I think that will hopefully come in time, like, but maybe it won't. And I think that's the part where I'm having a really hard time accepting the fact that this might be, like, lifelong.
Yeah. I think it's inevitable that you're going to have challenges you deal with for your whole life. And maybe those things won't change. I feel like you're going to find your way. I'm confident you'll find your way. I think it is just about letting it be, take however long it takes. You'll get there on your own time. You'll find what works. But where you are right now is absolutely fine. You're not any lesser for it. No matter what the voices in your head are going to try to tell you, the spirals are going to pull you down. To let you know you are not broken. You do not need to be fixed. You do not need to be anything different than you are. You are just naturally going to change anyways. And some of this stuff will, likely fall away as you find the stuff that works for you. But, it sounds like you are getting there anyways.
Yeah.
You're trying things.
Well, I mean, it's, and as you just said, like, things will fall away as you find what works for you. And that there's been a lot of instances in my life over the past decade where that has happened, right? Mm-hmm. I can think of all sorts of things where that's been the case. So yeah, that's kind of a good reflection. It's like, there's a lot of growth that's happened that I haven't even really been intentionally trying to drive. It's just been happening through living. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think you're on the right track with, a lot of what you've been saying over the last several months of just not wanting to do anything. It's probably your body telling you, stop trying things, stop doing, just stop thinking so much about it, stop worrying so much about it, just, like, let me be. Yeah. And then following your intuition to do things like your acting classes and all of that. Like, that's all good stuff to try, because that's something that's effective for you to get yourself out of your head and into different things. Like, then you just stick with that for a while, and if some kind of inspiration comes up to do something different or try something, then you follow that. Just sort of I'm trying to be easier about my life in general and just not take things so seriously. Take my work and my life and myself seriously, but in a way that's with a very gentle touch. Like, it's a lighter, looser approach where not everything feels so heavy and so intense. It's more, a little more playful, a little more curious and interested rather than, I got to fix this.
Right.
Because turns out I wasn't broken to begin with. Who knew?
Surprise.
My body probably knew. It's probably why it felt so bad when I kept trying to fix myself. It's like, I'm not broken. Yeah. But now we got to fix this one thing. And then these 10 other things. Awesome. I think we covered a lot of good stuff. Mm-hmm. So the last thing for us to cover, speaking of changes, this is actually us wrapping season 1 of this version of the podcast. Surprise.
You didn't even know you were in a seasoned podcast. Surprise.
Yeah.
We didn't know either until recently.
No, that was the original plan. And then once we got started, we just kind of, like, didn't stop to question it, which a good lesson for everybody to learn. Like, give yourself points to stop and reflect and ask, like, is this still working? Is this still what I want to do? So yes, this is our conclusion of season 1. We will be back for season 2, but we don't really know what season 2 is going to look like at this point. I think we have a rough idea that we want it to center more on creativity and doing things, and less on the talking about thoughts
doing things,
and feelings. Yeah, talking about doing things. Although that is, I mean, the nature of podcasting is that we're going to be talking, but we're going to be talking about things we've done rather than the things we want to do. So that is kind of the rough current outline. But of course, we reserve the right to change our minds. But I think what we would like to do is go out into the world and do things, do creative things specifically, but I think anything is fair game. And then we'll get together and we'll talk about it. And we would also like to be bringing other people onto the podcast. So that is something to listen out for. And also we're going to be doing a condensed season. So it'll probably be one episode a month for the year. So we'll be able to have a bit more time to go out and do creative things and recharge and then come together and have a conversation. So we are done for the year. And we will be back at some point in the new year. And yeah, we'll be probably still having these conversations, just not recorded. Because I still get a lot out of us talking about these things. Which is, I think, the original idea for the podcast was that you and I were just having these conversations and thought, hey, we should just record them and put them online. Which has been fun. Do you want to take a second to just reflect on your podcasting experience? Did you love it? Did you hate it?
No, I liked it. I mean, I started off being a bit more prepared for each episode with like taking notes and stuff like that. And then I sort of shifted into not doing that. It's like, what's the opposite of doing that?
Yeah, well, your capacity shifted as the podcast went on because when the podcast started, you were off from work.
That's right. Yeah. And so lots of shifts going on. And yeah, it's been good, but it has been strange having this kind of living diary of my last year, and it has been a pretty tumultuous year in some ways and not in others.
Same. Yeah.
And so that's odd. It's odd to have that just out there as like evidence of, the fact that I'm all over the place.
That's actually one of the things I like about it. It's something that would have bothered me years ago, because I'll think sometimes like, oh yeah, I said I was going to do that on the podcast and I just didn't do it. But I think it's an important part of my journey for me to be able to be okay with other people knowing that I change, and that sometimes I say things and I don't follow through, and that's just, it's something I'm working on to a degree, but I also know that, it is just a kind of a thing I do, and it is what it is. I always try to do the best I can, and that's sort of what I think about is whatever I'm saying in the moment always feels true to me in the moment. And I hope I change. I hope the things I say evolve and continue to reflect my changing life and perspective and all of that. But yeah, and I think that's one of the things I'd like us to do with this next version of the podcast is for it to be something that better takes into account our changing capacities.
Right.
So to have there be a bit more flexibility so that we can show up and really, have fun with it and have it be something that we feel like is less airing of our emotional laundry and all of that. Because that's one thing we were talking about a couple weeks ago. How this podcast really started. We really wanted to talk about creativity because we're both creative people. We wanted to talk about personal growth because that's something we're both interested in, and then building a career in the arts, which is something I still want to do, or I'm doing. Technically this is my career, is I not podcasting but teaching music, and I'm expanding that. But you're now less interested in that at least at this. And again, you might change your mind, but maybe not. And so like we want it to be something that's maybe a little more timeless, because we went really heavy in the direction of personal growth stuff this year. That's really, I think, predominantly a reflection of just where my head was at, because I went through a lot of growth in personal internal change this year. And naturally, like when I'm interested in something, I like to think about it and talk about it a lot. Also, I feel like I sort of realized like I really struggled to write this year. And I wonder if part of that is because I had this as an outlet for some of these things that I'm interested in.
Oh, yeah,
and I wonder
right.
if having the focus be more on the creativity and the doing things means that my thinking time will be able to be directed more towards my writing, which is something I'm really wanting to do. So that I feel very excited about this shift. I feel like it's going to be really fun for us and for people listening. And I feel like it's going to be really good for both of our journeys and what we're doing outside of it as well.
Yeah, because like for me, I'm trying to kind of get away a bit from the thinking.
Yeah.
Which improv is always really a fun exercise in that the instructor always teases me or I'll tease myself because he'll be like, this is one of those things you can't think. And I'm like, well, I'm really good at thinking.
I do.
And I'm really good at thinking about thinking too. And he just kind of laughs.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm trying to get out of that space. I do so much of that. Like I don't need I don't need another outlet to encourage me to think more. I need outlets to encourage me to do more. Do more and think less and think less before doing,
Yeah, have the thinking come after as you kind of reflect and I think that's more fun. And
I think like I'm excited to talk to other, like hopefully we can make this happen
absolutely.
where we get other people on the podcast because I'm really interested in hearing about other people's creative process and creative journeys and
yes, definitely.
Like what that looks like for them. Like I think that would be super like uplifting and inspiring and
I think that as I've been thinking over the last couple of weeks about what I maybe will want our like intention or mission statement to be. It's like to inspire people, to make them excited to create things. And I think it would be really fun to do that by connecting with other people. And the idea to bring it back to community, like building more of a community, which is not something we've really been able to do. And I think a lot of that comes down to just neither you nor I having the capacity to try to reach out to build a community because, we have lots of stuff going on. This podcast does take a long time. Like for anybody listening who hasn't done a podcast before, like there's a lot of work that goes into it. And so it takes up like a good chunk of time that I would like to be able to use to go and do stuff and build that community and find our people. So that's where we want to be able to reorient our focus and attention and then still have the podcast be sort of the chronicle of our creativity and all of that. But have this be less of a space for people to come and hear us just, to process our trauma and all of that. There are other podcasts that do that really well. And again, I love having writing as an outlet. And then again, I don't doubt that we'll still have these kinds of conversations. They'll just be while we're hanging out at your place and not for people to listen to. Although if anybody still wants to hear my thoughts on things, you'll be able to easily find them on my blog as I start blogging again and on YouTube as I finally get YouTube together. All that will happen again. I'm not going to make any promises as to when any of that will happen. It will happen when it happens. I'm okay with that taking the time it takes. See, I've changed. I've evolved. The me of a year ago would not have said that. She would have been riddled with anxiety. But now I am cool as a cucumber. So did we want to end off with some kind of an intention? Because it's not going to be an intention for the next couple of weeks, but maybe just like an overall intention going forward.
Okay, but you start.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'll sort of put out an umbrella intention for the year because we're almost at the end of the year. Okay. And I talked about this with you, but I haven't talked about this on the podcast. I'm not actually planning anything for next year. Like I did last year, I was very heavy into like these are my plans for the year. I'm going to be way more loose on my plans. I kind of want to see where my life takes me and let change happen organically and let things shift in a bit more of a natural way. But I would like to really continue to operate from my values and to explore what that means and how that might look different as I try different things. So operating from my values and just continuing to deepen my relationship with myself and continue this healing journey because it's actually been pretty profound, especially as of late. And yeah, I just want to see where it takes me.
Yeah, I like that. And I'm kind of on a similar trajectory, but no, maybe not. I'm also not going to be doing any planning. I kind of abandoned that like 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. I think like as we were talking, I was kind of reflecting on my own values, and I think integrity and authenticity are definitely ranking as pretty high up there.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought, I don't really know if this is a value, but exploration was a word that came to mind because, I've always really liked trying different things, and I get excited when I do different things. And the thing that has been driving a lot of the choices that I've been making over the past like couple of months has been exploring things that trigger a sense of fear within safe things. Like I'm talking like, so like the acting and the improv are the most recent examples, right? And I think that's what I'm actually going to continue to, I'm letting fear and discomfort be the things that sort of guide me forward. So where I'm feeling uncomfortable or out of place, like I'm letting that be an indication that those are the spaces I need to explore more. Again, within the confines of safety and all that stuff.
You're not going to be wrestling tigers or anything?
Yeah, I'm not going to be wandering dark alleys at 3 a.m. while intoxicated. Like that's not the kind of it's not the kind of fear that I'm trying to chase. Yeah, and so that's kind of where I'm at, I think, for the next little bit anyways. Is just, and not necessarily sticking with things. Like if I continue to feel really, really uncomfortable, it doesn't mean I'm going to continue doing those things, but at least trying those things that spark that sort of resistance to give myself a chance to figure out, is this something that I am resisting because it truly doesn't really mesh with me, or am I resisting it because I'm just scared of looking dumb? Yeah. Yeah.
This actually reminds me of another note I had made here, but I didn't bring it up. The idea of like giving yourself a new narrative or reframing the things you've been telling yourself. So the idea, like you were talking about, not finishing what you start, and I'm like, the way I think about you is that you're somebody who knows what you want. If you don't want to do something, you're just not going to do it. And I'm like, I like that because I stick with things way longer than I need to, like way past the point of diminishing returns. And so that just reminded me, like the idea of like trying things and then if they're not working for you, like dropping them. And I think that's a really healthy way to approach it. So yeah, I think that's, if you want to give yourself like a way to reframe some of your behavior, I guess if you could call it that, I think that's a good thing to like, I feel like yourself really well. You just have to like let yourself know yourself and not tell yourself a story about how who you are is failing.
Yeah.
But so you just, who you are. And that's always one of the things I really liked about you is like, you just like, no, that's not for me. But you're also willing to change your mind because you have had your mind changed over the course of, all the years I've known you. So
yeah.
Anyways, just giving you some more food for thought as you're thinking about that stuff.
That's a good point. And like when I think of like a value as being exploration, I mean, all of those unfinished projects could have just been little like, I just went down a little path just to explore it for a little bit and then decided, okay, I'm bored now.
Yeah, exactly. And I really like that because it lines up with my value of curiosity, but I like the word exploration because it feels more active. Because curiosity for me, it feels right because a lot of my curiosity comes to just how I think about things, and which then eventually does lead to action. But you seem like you like to do things, and so like exploration is like curiosity, but like in action.
Yeah,
so I think you and I definitely line up there. Oh yeah, I just want to clarify that I'm not ditching my time block planning. I will always bow to the altar of Cal Newport's time block planning. And I'm still doing quarterly planning, weekly planning. I'm just ditching my plan for the year because so many of the things I set up for myself for this year just didn't pan out because I was in a different place than I expected. I wasn't expecting to go on this really deep internal emotional journey, but I'm so glad I did because I feel like I'm just a lot happier now. And I wasn't expecting that. That wasn't on my plan. But I don't want to have, I want to let that stuff happen because who knows what can happen next year. So I'm trying to, be more flexible. But yeah, my organization and planning still really helps me. And I'm going to still do the things that work for me, but I'm going to be looser on the broader stage.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm still somebody who I love systems and being organized and planning to an extent. So when it, for as long as it serves me, I'm going to stick with it, but I do want to be more reflective and like more willing to let things go if they aren't. So maybe this time next year I won't do any of that anymore, but I think it's unlikely knowing me, but I do feel like I'm trying to find a balance and let myself exist on these different planes and have these different parts of me. So the part that wants some freedom to move, but also likes having some structure. So finding that integration, becoming a whole person.
Yeah.
I feel like I had something else to say, but I guess it wasn't important because I forgot. Or it was profound and you will all be worse off for not having heard it.
That's the worst.
So yeah, we'll be back. We don't know in what iteration. We might have a new podcast name, maybe a new theme song, maybe a new cover art. Who knows? We'll be back though. And but in the meantime, you can still send questions and comments to streamofheartpodcast@gmail.com. Even if that ends up changing, I'm going to keep the account open and check it. And so if somebody is listening to our podcast, 10 years down the line, you can still send questions and comments, and they won't be talked about on the podcast probably, but I don't think we'll still be podcasting in 10 years. I don't want to still be podcasting in 10 years. Not rich roll. But I'll still answer any questions via email. So I'm still active there. We still have our Discord. Again, it might change, probably will change. We want to make it more creativity centered and more community centered. So yeah, lots of changes going forward. We still have our Instagram, but I don't know what's going to be happening with that. I hate Instagram. I think I would rather us build through like Substack or something else or website. Like I'm okay with not having social media at all. Doing our own thing. Yeah, I think that's everything. So have a great holiday season and a great start to the new year, everybody. And we will catch you in the next episode of whatever our podcast is by that point. Bye.
Bye.